Okay, I think we can start. So welcome back, second time at YouTube, and it was your choice. There were on Twitter, there was a survey, and so I asked you where you should proceed, YouTube or back to Vimeo or Twitch, and you decided for YouTube. So there's like 150 people actually participated, which is nice. So start with the, by the way, you can also use the chat. So from time to time, I will look at a chat. Oh, someone says hello, and Elliot Balas also said indeed. So something happens in the chat. Now, first point or topic, first item, media predictions. So someone, I forgot to look it up, reminded me that this year I forgot the predictions. And as I mentioned earlier, I think it was like 3 airhacks TV ago. I started with the prediction, but had no time to complete that. And what I got the genius idea that I could do a media predictions, and exactly on June the 15th, I published that. It's a little bit longer because so I added some observations. So I named that observation and predictions. And what I just there was just write up what I observe in the industry is like I see that Kubernetes is still the choice for private clouds, but in public clouds, no one cares really because you can orchestrate containers by whatever you have, so you don't have to use Kubernetes. And also the lambdas are going to be used more reasonable or in sensible way. Like triggers or not just, I think times are over where someone tries to decompose an existing monolith into hundreds of lambdas. And so what also happens, so this is what I predicted for 10 years. So clouds are great. They are scaling. They have unique qualities like security and scalability. So as long as your company is growing, everything is fine. If it stops growing, it becomes too expensive. And what companies are doing are moving their workloads out of the clouds. And there's an article, Repatriation, about how the companies are doing this. And some companies have to do it because of the pressure. So interesting read. And the conclusion is that actually what the most reasonable thing would be to run I would say, boring applications on premise and just use the top features from the cloud. This is what we are usually doing. And monthly cloud bill driven development. I see this from time to time. So it was a funny story. It was a startup and we had a small amount of microservices. And I told the product manager or the guy in charge of money, but every microservice will cost you money. So it is like it is. It is more expensive. And the first question was, can we not merge it back? Then it's going to be cheaper, right? So so I just expect that more and more that your teams are going to be forced to write software which runs less expensively on the clouds, which means also there's more spaghetti code involved, or you will try to call APIs less to save money, stuff like that, which is funny because we argued the entire time that maintainability and productivity is more important than hardware, and now what happens? Cloud dictates what to do, and this is basically, so I would like to reread it, but GraalVM appears again. And interesting also about Lombok, right? Because Java becomes more and more lean and less verbose. So the get and setter feature from Lombok is no more necessary because we have Java records. Yeah. So this was the prediction. So as promised, I wrote that. If you like, read it, and feedback is highly appreciated. So what struck me, I got positive feedback. So there was I thought it would be more, contradictions, but seems like it was well received and is somehow popular. So already 4,000 people read it already, or at least clicked that. Okay, So then podcast. So the podcast, also some interesting episodes. This was the June the 11th, and I think this was the after the last Airhacks TV. I had a nice conversation with Kozuki Kawakuchi. This is actually the guy who created Hudson or Jenkins. So really interesting story how it happened. Then I had a chat with Justin Lee, and funny thing is his Twitter handle is eventually. You see, this is like this is a joke, and I always thought it's like even see holy or something like this. So I always misread that, and after 10 years we clarified actually what it means. And what I didn't know is I knew Justin Lee from the old Glassfish days, but he was actually behind the Java WebSockets implementation, which is also interesting. And with Kevin, Heavy Metal Vitek, this is he's one of the researchers of blockchain. So we had the in-depth conversation to know what happens in the blockchain. And the recent one is with an Open API committer, and we have one question regarding Open API. So I hope it's useful. Elliot asked me, would you talk more about the Loom prediction? I don't use Loom because I think Java is lean enough, and Loom is very controversial, I would say. If you just search for Loom, people hate it and people love it. I would say in some projects where you are generating, added value stuff, like for instance, in one project we used Loom to generate equals and hash code for a cache, because the domain objects were cached and there was actually worth using Loom. But I wouldn't use Loom just to generate, Lombok. Sorry. This is why I think you mean Lombok. I wouldn't use Lombok, what I meant. I wouldn't use Lombok for like just log and get and set a generation. And what I meant by Loom, Project Loom is like virtual threading in Java. And what it allows us to be, you can start basically many concurrent processes or threads for free. And what it means is you can have request response programming without any downside, I would say. You can create stable software with understandable code. This will kill, all the reactive use cases where developers tried to provide better performance for fun, I would say. Often there was no reason except they'd really like to try out reactive programming. So for that, you can just stick with Loom, and reactive programming becomes really interesting in cases like Kafka WebSockets or Kinesis or something like this, where you have a stream event source and you would like to react to new events. And Elliot asked me, will it completely replace reactive? I think it will. In most cases, which I saw, it was like developers try to use reactive programming for resources which are not reactive, and this is messy if you ask me, and it should replace this. But if you are working with Kafka, reactive is very simple. It's actually beautiful, so just use reactive then. But in all also questionable cases, I think you can remove reactive. So we are on the same page. Okay, now just we can close that, and so. Predictions done. Then, friend of the show, Benjamin Marwell, and a funny story, because he's a little bit afraid that I will, make fun of him here on the show, so you'll read the Twitter. And I would say, don't worry, Ben, I will introduce you as an enterprise visual basic developer. And he said, okay, this is how it looks like, so funny. But what happened? I forgot actually to mention that. So the problem I have is there are too many registrations for this workshop. So what I created a beautiful badge in JavaScript with some shadow and beautiful font that the workshop is full. And so please don't register because too many attendees already. And I said, okay, we have also too many topics. So and it was actually my mistake. I should name it like Java on AWS Bootstrap, like the first level, and then I could advance. But I just thought, okay, just do it. And what I got the idea that the next workshop is going to be serverless Java on AWS. So I announced that yesterday. So here you can absolutely register. And there are already, I think, one registration. So it will So 99% will definitely take place. And funny story or interesting story is I never had to cancel a workshop. So for the entire, I do it probably for 7 years, all workshops took place. So you can just register and hope this one will also take place. So in this workshop, I will fully focus on serverless, just serverless. And what Benjamin said, okay, there's a Siemens air hook, which is saying in German, like, there is some novice developer. You can go to him as like, not developer, like how to call it, a carpenter or something, and says, you can tell him, bring me a Siemens air hooks, a thing which does not exist, and this is the fun. So I said, okay, this doesn't exist. But interesting part, I will speak about microprofile, Jakarta IE, and Java, because we'll also use CDK, Cloud Development Kit, and some raw lambdas. So not only microprofile, so we will use the AWS APIs and microprofile Jakarta IE, so we'll not just microprofile in Jakarta IE. But I would say you can absolutely have serverless servers. So what's the difference? So the difference is without serverless, you will have to rent the machine EC2 on Amazon. You will have to put an operating system on it. So actually we do it on Thursday with the operating system in the machine, but no more in December. And then you can install Java and then run your software, right? Even in this is how it works on ECS. But in the serverless mode, you don't care about all the machines. You can just put your task or your pod or whatever, and it just runs. And you can just say, I would like to have 5 CPUs. And the most interesting part is if you say, today I'm done. I will I will shut down my service. You don't have to pay for anything. So you can scale down to zero, not shut down the service. You can scale down to zero without paying anything, which is an interesting question whether Kubernetes can be actually serverless, because you always have to pay for the control plane. Okay. So this was the explanation of serverless and Java and servers. And I already mentioned it several times. There's an interesting thing called Petra Cloud. I forgot to open that. And what they are doing, this is also interesting. What Petra Cloud is, it is a Kubernetes operator. So you never have to install Petra. You never have to care about the machines. You just put the word to the cloud and it just gets deployed and automatically distributed across all the nodes. So for me, it's like serverless Petra server, right? So so we'll also talk briefly about that. By the way, really interesting story to run your boring CRUD workloads or applications. And by the way, I had also a nice chat I will publish in a few weeks on Airhacks FM about Google App Engine. Also interesting idea or similar idea. So we have it. So this was Petra Cloud and this was serverless Java. And let's see the next topic. So now it's time to migrate to Quarkus to 0. I would migrate. I think I don't expect any problems. And then it said we already migrated our application to Quarkus to 0. Took about 3 hours effort. Usually should be faster than 3 hours. So maybe Dennis Frank had some coffee breaks or something like this. So or he migrated Microsoft Office or something like this. Just kidding. So I would just use the recent Quarkus version, because if in case the community is very vibrant, if something breaks, you get immediately the feedback. If you stick too long for an older version, it's more risk, if you ask me. Okay, or buy supported Red Hat, then you can stick with older version. Okay, now this was the longer explanation of the tweet here, because it's a reaction of Benjamin to my tweet about the serverless workshop. Now, friend of the show, I forgot his name. I think it was Ankur from India. So what I did last week, I think there was the big Airhacks discussion show, and Anke asked me a really great question, but I didn't answer this properly or had no time to answer it properly. And what he ask me how microprofile Jakarta E, this was at least my understanding, will help me or to run applications on the cloud. So is it easier, or how it fits with Cassandra and all this stuff? And my answer basically was cloud won't help you, or microprofile doesn't help you. And maybe to clarify that, if you are running applications in the cloud, with the exception of Petra Cloud, it's not like, our application server manages everything. It's more like we just use microprofile or Jakarta E as the very convenient and productive programming model. But we are not injecting cloud resources. At least this is not what I am doing. Sometimes what happens if you run Quarkus, what you can do is you can have environment entries, let's say at Kubernetes, ECS Fargate, Azure Container Instances, and then you can have in microprofile config placeholders, and you can inject secrets from outside or passwords or something. This is the integration. And if you have a cloud, there is actually almost no difference to your data center. You have load balancers. You can say, and you have almost always load balancers, except in really serverless options like AWS Lambdas, but even in ECS Fargate, which is serverless, you have a load balancer. And so the load balancer distributes the load, so you can configure what to behave, and every node is on its own. It's like JVM, and the JVM talks. If it talks to a database, you have to be careful with the caches, and if you have Lambda, you also have to be careful with the state, because what happens, Lambda becomes more and more like a container. For instance, you can now even mount EFS, like a file system, to Lambdas, which becomes more and more like a server. So I would say there is no secret sauce in the clouds, absolutely not. What you get, you can very easily, spin up resources like databases or Kafka or Elasticsearch. This is what you can do, but it's not like clouds will help you. I would even argue it's getting more complicated, and you will have to understand more. Because if you are not running Lambdas, maybe you're a little bit more lucky. So you can ship, the entire monolith to the cloud, and then you don't have problems. If you have just Lambdas, you will, from day one, you have to think about transactions, orchestration, how it's called, choreography or orchestration, so how the transactions are flowing. So so unfortunately, there is no hope in the clouds. Unfortunately, it's very good, because we are not going to be jobless. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So the next thing is also, we have just a few questions. So I just put something. There is a new CPU, which is interesting. So I also mentioned it several times in the predictions, and it's called Graviton, AWS Graviton, which is ARM-based CPU. And why it's interesting, why I mention this at all, is because it is fast and cheap. It is cheaper than Intel, and it consumes less power. So it could be even environment friendly. So this is the Graviton, and I played with the CPU for a long time, and I had everything in place, and I said, okay, maybe I could record a screencast, what I did on YouTube. You can look at that. And Graviton is okay. Now I would deploy Quarkus on Graviton, but what I find out that Graviton on Helidon sounds nicer. So I deployed Helidon on Graviton and compared the performance with the smallest Graviton CPU to my MacBook Pro i9, and Graviton was not that slower. And I think this Graviton, if you run the entire month, it will cost you €5 or something without the traffic. So it's interesting one. Okay, this was the Graviton, and I would say now let's back here. And I got a really good question from Gezifer and Alexander Rühl. And ask me, when running applications in cloud environments with having all the serverless services and small runtimes like Quarkus, using classic Jakarta is server like you propose several tasks, still your recommendation, or would rather use the former too? Okay, very good question. And I would say there's a big difference whether you are running as a function or as a service or as a container. So if your application would run on the EC2 Graviton, what I showed you earlier, it's not like you will save a huge amount of money by replacing Payara with Quarkus. Because you are not paid by execution, you have to pay for the instance for the entire time. And even what you could do, you could say, okay, I'm renting the instance for 3 years, and you get even 80% off or something, or 50 or some crazy amount of money. So, but in Lambda case, it is huge difference, because in Lambda case, I would say if you're running Java as a function, the only thing which is reasonable is using GraalVM, because you will have to pay for memory and the invocation duration. So if you will use Lambda, which is, I would say, GraalVM on Lambda, it is, I would say, 80% smaller, and the startup time is, instead of 1 second, I don't know, 20, 30 milliseconds, or significantly faster. And if your application is not doing a lot, you will just pay a fraction of the money. So this is you cannot just run Payara as a Lambda, because if you will boot 3 seconds, and the Quarkus or Helidon or Micronode will take for one invocation 50 milliseconds, you will pay orders of magnitude more. So I would say if you're running on Kubernetes, ECS, Azure Container Instances, or AKS, or Google Kubernetes, GKE engine, I think, don't worry too much about the memory. It's not that bad. But if you're running Lambdas, it is crucial to have short execution times, and memory is crucial. And then the only thing you can do reasonably is GraalVM. Okay. Hans Pickemat, friend of the show, asked me, roles allowed, which exception to throw, and he throws EGB exception. So to be honest, if I don't know what to throw, I always throw illegal state exception and see what happens. So what I will do in your case, if you don't know, just throw illegal state exception and watch the stack trace, and you will see what happens, and what you would expect that if you throw illegal state exception, which is runtime, the transaction going to be rolled back. And now is the question, what is the most important thing is that you get, 403 or 401 HTTP status code. So what you should see in the REST endpoint, 401, 403, and not 500. So this is the short answer. The longer answer is, I looked it up, and this is the spec, and this is JavaX Security Enterprise. And as you can see, there's one exception, authentication exception, a generic authentication exception. So, and I would, in your case, throw this JavaX Security Enterprise Authentication exception, because it is specified like that, and I will throw this, not EGB exception. Because EGB is one possible implementation, but this roles allowed is it is decoupled from EGBs in Jakarta 8, and I will throw this. Okay, Hans, thank you. And thank you for attending the airhacks.live workshops in the past. Now something interesting happened. So Mr. Dmitry Apkazi from Moscow, and friend of the show, Daniel Vamara. And Daniel was in one of the airhacks at Munich airport, so not virtual, but in person, as I remember. And he asked me, what to do with search criteria. And Daniel already, discussed with Mr. forgot his name. Sorry, from Mr. Dmitry. Dmitry is simple. Dmitry Apkazi. Dmitry Apkazi and Daniel Vamara. Yeah, exactly. So so what I do with search, I consider search as being a resource. So it's okay, searches, let's say. And then I say, okay, what I would like to do is create a search. I don't even know whether this is really, Rastafarians, or how is the Hateoasonian way of HTTP. So, and I consider the path like searches, and I'm posting a JSON object to the searches, and this JSON object has everything you need to perform the search. What I remember, it was I already mentioned it several times on the show. It's probably 5 years ago. So in one project, we even passed a JSON object which was compatible with named query in JPA. We also passed the name of the query in the JSON object, and we could execute whatever we liked on the server, whatever named query we had, and the return value, what we got back, was deserialized in JSON again. So this was like a generic query execution. So this is what I will do. And it seems like Mr. Daniel Vamara also did something similar. And the only maybe what I will do differently is not search, rather searches, because always plural. And what you could even do is, if you would be really strict, you could even store the search on the server and then like a cache and then refer to it. But I never did it. I was too lazy. So, okay. Perfect. So it goes back and forth. Okay. Now, Mr. Javier Toya, properly. From Santiago de Compostela from Spain. So welcome from Spain, and there's lots of going on here in the chat. Yeah, exactly. John Klingen, a friend of the show, and he was one of the, I think, product managers from Glassfish. He's now in the chat, and also product manager from Quarkus. And question to John Klingen, to the chat. What interests me, if you have, how it's called, the Red Hat version of GraalVM, what I heard is that you cannot easily, it is not clear whether you can run it as a Lambda, AWS Lambda or not. So this is the question to John right now, whether we can use the Red Hat version of GraalVM to run Quarkus on Lambda, which is related to the show. So this is the question to John. And Elliot asked me, I notice a growing trend of Java defectors loudly voicing opposition to Java in favor of Kotlin and Scala. There is even a podcast with James Ward and Bruce Eckel dedicated to exactly this topic. Yeah, I always had the problem that everyone wanted to use everything but not Java. I remember 2003, I was told in a project, developers complained why I'm not using Groovy. And then Scala came out, the same story, say why I'm not interested in Scala. And Kotlin is nice, but Java is also nice. And for me, it's not like the Java syntax is a major problem. And by the way, I think James Ward also had a podcast about Flex, Adobe Flex. I'm pretty sure that he had. Or I wrote a book about Adobe Flex. And Flex was the same thing. I was asking why I'm still using JavaFX, not Adobe Flex. And I have to say JavaFX survives, but not Flex. So I would say if you're doing Android, absolutely do Kotlin. But I don't think in my project I could save a lot of money, effort, or whatever with Kotlin comparing to Java. So the problems are YAML oriented or somewhere else, but not the Java syntax anymore. And I really like Java, so there's no reason to move. And if I would move, from Java to Kotlin, people Scala, there are lots more than Kotlin. So but you can just use Kotlin if you like. And for me, by the way, it's the same in JavaScript, right? I'm just use plain JavaScript. I got asked the questions why you are not using TypeScript, and now it seems like it shifts a little bit. There are more and more Java developers who really like plain JavaScript and no more TypeScript. So Mandrel, exactly, Mandrel. So John, what's the story? Can I use Mandrel on AWS Lambda without problems and license it? So this was the question. And John, please don't type on phone during the show, right? So this is absolutely forbidden. And by the way, we also had a nice conversation with John Klingen on Airhacks FM. So if you would like to know everything about John, listen to Airhacks FM. Now, so this is almost too long question, but okay. And Javier asked me, basically, there are multiple, what is my understanding, multiple microservices with open API endpoints, and Javier would like to merge them. So microprofile, open API. So this is the microprofile spec, and what you see here is this the open API. Usually it's YAML, but it can be JSON. So it has to be also JSON. So you can choose between both. So what it means is what you get back is multiple JSON representation of your microservice. And by the way, what I was a little bit confused, you asked me, where was it? You are generating the Open API description from source code. What I'm generating the description not from source code, rather than from bytecode. So I'm using the annotations, and then I get the Open API. This is what I'm usually doing. I never generated the Open API from source code, which is doable because there is like metadata extraction going on. So you could do this, but I always use in Quarkus, you just put the annotations and it's working. So what I will do is, what you can absolutely do is you have like an aggregation service which gathers all the JSONs and merges them. And we have nice JSON-P API and JSON-B API. Both are supported by all microprofile runtimes I know. So, and then you can merge them and emit as YAML or whatever you like. You will have to implement that, but because it's JSON, it's simple. And if you need, and this is also static. So what I now, little bit confused right now for a second because I got another idea. You could do a similar thing which I did in, if you go to microprofile or blogpad, let's say GitHub, Adam Bean, blogpad. And this is like, if I will find a little bit more time, it will be my new blog engine. And this was, I think, even already migrated to Quarkus old version. But this one, I'm using GraalVM, which load JavaScript, so I can very easily manipulate JSON. So you can do this as well. So you can have, GraalVM or Mandrel. No, Mandrel not, because Mandrel is just the native compilation. GraalVM with JavaScript support, and then you can use plain JavaScript to manipulate JSON, which is nice, the structuring and whatever. So I will implement by yourself. It just do a service, and the service will be not called very often, because the Open API only changes on redeployment, right? So this is what I will do. I hope this was your question, and my answer is compatible with your question. So Mr. Dennis Frank asked me, they have Jakarta 8 Monolith, which is a good thing. I would say the Monolith will be coming back soon, because, so as I already said in the cloud, in another client, if you think about this, right, regardless how low the overhead in the cloud is, you are actually paying for the overhead, right? So if you have, let's say empty Lambda function written in assembler, and it consumes just 1 meg of memory or 400K. So if you invoke the Lambda, you will pay for the 400K and from the duration of the invocation, right? Now imagine you say 1 Lambda is too monolithic. So you will implement 100 chain Lambdas. So if 1 transaction causes 100 invocations, you will have to pay 100 times more. So this is what, and of course, the easiest possible thing to save money is to say, okay, I don't have 100 lambdas, just 1. You have just one overhead, and then your runtime can be larger. And I think this, when people recognize that, it already starts to happen, right? So don't be too fast with the the structuring of your Jakarta 8 monolith. But let's say you would really like to do this. Which option do you have? I would not use RMI EGBs. Also, because it is, the problem is, you will have to have the proxies on the other server, and there are some class path on class versioning and serialization issues, and there are security risks with the Java serialization, so I would not use that. GraphQL, maybe, but GraphQL is a lot of work to do, because there's like the GraphQL is like a facade with a resolver, and you will have to implement the resolver by yourself. You could use microprofile GraphQL, for instance, for that. But GraphQL is more suitable for frontends, I would say. What GraphQL is like Hibernate query by example. It looks like this. So it is not, and if you have a monolith now, and what I'm assuming is that you have Java class invokes another Java class. So in this particular case, I don't think GraphQL will suit you well. So what remains is gRPC and REST, both. And so now the question is, which user interface you are thinking about? I guess you will get a kind of user interface in JavaScript. Then I will go with REST first. I would not start with gRPC. what gRPC is basically is bidirectional HTTP2 communication. So it is from service to service communication is great, but I would go with REST. It means JAX-RS. This is what most of my services are doing. And if you are saying, okay, I would like to have a kind of a messaging, then I would, if you're thinking about using Kafka or something similar, you will have to refactor the application anyway, because what Kafka basically is a database. And I assume you have already a database. So I think REST is the most reasonable thing. GraphQL only if you have query-oriented interfaces, and you would be happy with Hibernate Search, for instance. And gRPC is a special case. Okay. Now, okay, John, it's clear. Just about the licensing, I will ping you maybe afterwards. John, happy holidays, and yeah, I would re-invite you back to airhacks FM so we can have a chat again. So Alexander asked me, do you think it's feasible to put a typical REST cloud CRUD service built with Quarkus GraalVM into AWS Lambda? Absolutely. This is what I was investigating right now. What you can do is you can pick actually a JAX-RS application and ship it as Lambda. It is very feasible. Yeah, you can absolutely do this. And yeah. And why you would do this? To save money, for instance, right? So if you have to do the math, how often the application is invoked, and there is an AWS calculator, so you will see it. And instead of calculating this, what I'm doing is I'm creating a proof of concept and should run the entire night, and I see what it costs next day. So this is my approach. It's a little bit lazy but more fun. Exactly what I did always with system or stress test, right? Instead of believing with 10 invocations per second, I just hammered, try to break the server and saw what happened. So exactly the same approach. So nice. This time it was shorter. Let's see what Twitter says. Nothing, which is a good thing. The last time was way too long. So thank you for all the questions. This time was fun. And I would say, see you next time. Thank you for watching. And I'm glad you like YouTube. So for me, it's also easier to stream via YouTube. So thank you a lot. And see you next time. Bye. Hi, Adam here again. What I noticed, I forgot to answer one question, the last one. And this was a blog comment. And so what is the background? The question is, there were some problems with Quarkus 2.0 continuous testing functionality. I recorded a video, and what I wanted to show in the video is that how I'm using Quarkus for testing. So what I'm usually doing, I have one microservice with functionality, one project, and another project, standalone Maven project, is just about system or integration testing. So standalone Quarkus. This is exactly what I did in Jakarta E. For Jakarta E service, I'm doing now with Quarkus as well. And I recorded a video, and I got a comment from Aldo, and he said, okay, he tried to replicate what I did, but it didn't work. And what I think what could be the problem is, Aldo, you didn't use the recent Quarkus 2.0 because this functionality is only available in Quarkus 2.0. And if you start the Quarkus with Quarkus:dev, watch closely the shortcuts. You should see some hints in the terminal. So and then on any change, what should happen? The entire test has to be reloaded. So this is the entire point. So now, thank you for watching, and see you at upcoming Airhacks Live projects, conferences, and of course at the next Airhacks TV. So thank you and bye.